When was the last time you walked into a room and you already knew who you were, exactly who you were before you walked into that room? You weren't looking left and right, trying to see what other people think about you, but you already knew. You were super self assured about exactly who you were, and you didn't need anyone else's opinion about that. When was the last time you walked into a room feeling that way? And I'm asking you this because tonight, that's exactly what I had to do. Tonight, I had to get crystal clear about exactly who I was. And I had to be so clear that there was no space left for anyone else to fill in the blanks. I needed to be sure about that because it was a very difficult room that I had to walk in tonight. I don't want to go into details because I don't want this channel to be about that. And I don't want my brand to be about that. But just know that I had to go to this event tonight. It was a difficult room that I had to walk into where a part of my personal life was going to be known to other people. And I was very nervous about that. I honestly didn't know how to be ready for it because how do you get ready for things like that? How do you get ready for difficult situations? How do you get ready for difficult conversations, especially the ones that are on a personal level? It was even difficult because it was a professional room where my personal life was also exposed to them, and I needed to make something clear to them. I almost didn't go to that event because I didn't want to have to face that, but I'm so glad that I didn't allow my fear to stop me from experiencing something that truly was a growth opportunity. We all have our own versions of this. I think we all have our own versions of having to go into rooms that we're nervous to go into, but that we know that we feel called to walk into because there's a version of ourselves that would benefit from it, that would grow from that experience. So this was one of those rooms where I had to walk into where people were invested in a version of my personal life that no longer existed, and I needed to make that very clear. It wasn't a room that I was able to control the narrative, and that's what made it scary, but I knew that I didn't need to control their narrative of me. What I needed to do was control my narrative of me. What I thought about me was more important than what they think about me, and that's one of the biggest life lessons and revelations that I have gotten in my life, that it doesn't matter so much what other people think. It matters so much more what you think. If you can get very clear and confident of what you think about you, I promise you what other people think will become almost irrelevant. But I am still human, so I'll be honest with you. There was definitely a version of me that wanted to shrink tonight. In fact, there was a version of me that didn't even want to attend that event. However, the person that I want to become, she doesn't shrink, right? She doesn't allow difficult situations to make her run away from, growth opportunities. So here's something that one of the most important life lessons that I've learned as a lawyer was that you don't just walk into difficult rooms. The most difficult rooms that lawyers have to walk into is usually a courtroom. And for some lawyers, it's a boardroom, which is almost kind of like the same in a way. They don't just walk into rooms like that without having prepared for it, right? They actually thoroughly prepare to walk into a difficult room. Great lawyers don't just prepare their argument, they also prepare their state, because there's nothing like a lawyer with a great argument that hasn't taken care of their inner world. If they appear anxious or rattled or nervous, it does take away from the strength of their argument. So great lawyers don't just prepare great arguments, but they also prepare their state. And that's one of the things that I've had to do tonight. And that's one of the things that I recommend you do when you have to walk into any difficult rooms, or when you have to face any difficult situations. First thing you do is name the charges. And the reason for that is you simply just can't argue against charges that you haven't identified, things that you haven't named. If you don't know who the enemy is, then you don't really know who you're fighting, right? So you need to be very clear on the charges that usually it's fear. So I've had to ask myself, what is fear charging me with? And what came up with was that I had this fear of being perceived, right? This fear of being seen, this fear of being judged, this fear of stories being made up about me in rooms that I may not even be there to correct, right? To correct their version of their stories. And also I also had this fear of having to explain myself to other people. But what I've had to learn is that fear is not evidence. Like, fear is just a testimony that can be examined and cross-examined and dismissed, right? Fear is just, usually, like the saying goes, false evidence appearing real. So the general rule is that being afraid of something doesn't make it true. And in my mental courtroom, fears that are not supported by evidence do not get to take up space in my inner world, do not get to be a part of my reality. They don't get to be a part of my decision making. Only fears that are supported by evidence, which oftentimes they're not. So in those cases, the case has to be dismissed. I cannot hold on to a fear that just makes no sense because it's not supported by evidence from a logical standpoint. So next thing, after I understand what the charges are against me, I like to ask a very important question. What do I know to be true about me? Which is, what do I know to be true before walking into this room? This room can stand for anything, any difficult situation. It could be a difficult conversation that you need to have, or whatever it is that you need to substitute it for. But ultimately, what do you know to be true? And when I reflected on that, I realized that what I know to be true is that I've done hard things before and I've survived, right? And I'm still here. What I know to be true about me is that my worth is never on any ballot. It's never up for voting, right? No one gets to vote on my worth. It's something that I get to determine. It's my decision to make. I'm the only person that gets to decide that because I'm a sovereign being. Do any of you guys get to vote for a king or a queen? No. And that's what being sovereign is. Sovereign means that no one gets to vote for you to be in office. It's something that you inherited, right? You inherited your free will. And so no one else gets to take that away from you ever. And the reason for that is because you already have it. It's already yours. It already belongs to you. So in difficult situations like this, when you have these high stakes situations, you do want to get ready. You do want to prepare yourself, not just physically, right? Obviously, I think I'm a true believer that the physical preparation does matter. A lawyer with the right suit definitely makes a difference in their level of confidence. The same way when you're walking into any room, I think the way you dress up, the way you present yourself definitely can make a big difference. So with that philosophy in mind, I made sure that everything that I chose was on purpose. I had to choose a dress that I felt very confident in. I chose jewelry, a hairstyle that I felt very confident in. And I think all of that definitely helped. I made sure that how I presented myself physically was a representation of the message that I wanted to carry into the world, that it was a representation of who I am and what I stand for. And some people may think that's vanity, but I don't think it's vanity at all. I think it's preparation. I think it's proper preparation. It's like a lawyer walking into a room with sweatpants, right? You're gonna think, okay, like what's wrong with you, right? You're not gonna think that there's vanity, right? It does matter how you present yourself out into the world, because I think preparation is a form of self-respect. So before walking out the door, I make sure that I check myself out, that I felt confident, that I felt good about myself. And I ask myself a question that I love to ask myself before I walk into any difficult situation, any difficult room, which is, who am I walking in as? Right? Who am I walking in as? It's so important to me to clarify my identity, to make sure that I'm the one who is the author of that and that I'm not leaving it up for anybody else to define that for me. And I needed to remind myself that I'm not walking into any room with what people think that I should be, that I'm not walking into any room based on what people remember me as, that I'm walking into any room, difficult or not, that I'm walking into every room as exactly who I say that I am. And so I needed to answer that question for myself before anyone else had a chance to. And that's the whole thing. That's what the mental courtroom really is about. It's not about controlling what happens in the room. It's about deciding who you are before you get there. Because when you hold your own verdict, when you reclaim your power to determine and render and decide your own verdict, nobody else gets to, because there's no space for them, because you've occupied your own space, you've occupied your own life, you've taken up space in your own life. There's no space left for anyone else to dictate what happens there, because you've taken control and you're the ruler and you're the sovereign being and the sovereign leader of your own life, of your own destiny, that you have taken full possession of your free will, which I think is the most beautiful gift that humanity has been gifted with. So if you have a hard room that you need to walk into like me, or a difficult conversation that you know you need to have, or whatever that difficult situation might be, it could be a conversation, a reunion that you need to attend, a presentation that you've been dreading, a moment that you just don't want to walk into. I hope that this video can give you some ideas on how you can do hard things by preparing your state, by preparing yourself adequately by examining yourself and asking the hard questions so that you can be ready. Do this before you walk into any difficult rooms or any difficult situation. One, I want you to name the charges that fear is bringing against you. Then I want you to examine those charges and ask for evidence. And anything that fear has to say that cannot be supported by evidence has got to go, because we only allow evidence-based thoughts and beliefs to infiltrate our minds over here. That's our standard. That's how we choose to live our lives as sovereign beings. We don't allow other people's opinions, things that makes no sense, to dictate how we live our lives, right? Our standard is higher than that. And then you want to build your case from what you actually know to be true, right? Once you've determined what's true from what's not true, then you use truth as your most important weapon to build your life, to build a case for your life, to win the most important case you will ever win, which is the case for your own life. And from there, you get to decide your verdict before anyone else gets the chance to, before anyone else tries to hand you theirs, because people will definitely volunteer their verdicts and their thoughts and their opinions about you. And then you can just smile and just know deep down inside that job has already been taken by you. You've already done that job. You don't need them to tell you you are. You've already decided that. No, thank you. So yeah, that's the practice. That's what really helped me to get through tonight. I really hope that helps. If you have found this video helpful, go ahead and subscribe and like so that I know, because if you don't tell me, I won't know. I would love to hear you in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time.